Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. If you've got questions today, when you're in Mokana, make sure to ask those questions early and vote on those questions. We have a lot of questions today and a great panel to answer those questions. So make sure to vote on the questions so we know what order you'd like us to manage them in. If you're not in Mokana, you can ask questions any time of the day. So if you're watching this later, go to askofficehours.global, askofficehours.global. You can go ahead and ask your question there. Use that little QR code. And those will go in if you're watching after the show the next day. They might go in today if you put them in right now. But again, at the end of the day, no matter when you're watching, you can put the questions in there, and then we'll feed them into the system as we move forward. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first question this morning comes from Matthew Count in Oakland, and the question is, when setting up a redundant stream as a failsafe, do we need two encoders?
Mickey?
Yeah, definitely need two encoders to go to your CDN if you want redundancy there. But aside from a separate encode, you would also ideally want to have a totally separate path out of the building, so a different internet connection, a different WAN connection, and as well as a totally separate power solution as well. So a separate UPS and possibly a generator.
All right, go ahead, Jeff.
So my assumption was correct that Mickey would field that question beautifully, and I kind of wanted to take this more into the discussion of broader redundancy, because thinking about that is something I do all the time, and that's something we're going to think about with field recording as well. So at what point, except for having exactly duplicate chains of everything, microphones, cameras, cables that are completely separate, including one running off of battery and another running off of power from the venue, are you truly redundant? So I'm just kind of like asking the panel their thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know that for many of our shows, we are very redundant. So it is not, I wouldn't say truly redundant in every way, shape, or form. But I know with PixelCore, we had two switchers. We had two of almost everything in the system. And then we had what we call crikey kits that had lots of backups. And, we had extra cross-point cards for our routers, and we had extra routers. So, we had ways, and one of the reasons that we used a lot of patch panels was because we could patch our way through. We actually patched our way out of a router that went down for a big show. And so there are a lot of, thinking about what those things are ahead of time. And there's two parts of that, I would say. One is the redundancy, which you talked about. And the other is a highly skilled crew that will know what to do with that redundancy when it happens. Because oftentimes, you have seconds to make decisions, and you have to have a crew that can do that effectively. Go ahead, Mickey.
Just going back to Jeff's question earlier, how much is too much redundancy, and it boils down to, of course, how important is this event? What are the risks? How detrimental are the risks of possible failure? Sticking to just on the encoder and on the way out to your distribution, take a look at what has a higher likelihood of failing. Typically, between power and connectivity, I guess that would depend on your venue, your location. But I would see connectivity as a higher likelihood of failure than your power. But if you're in a place where you always have blackouts, then of course that dynamic would shift.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and to me, this is always a judgment about responsibility. You say redundant stream, so I'm assuming you have overall responsibility for delivering that stream into the web. And if so, every answer you've gotten is brilliant and right on point. I mean, literally, you have to have backups, hopefully primary, secondary, possibly tertiary, backups for everything necessary to get that out of the building and onto the web. In my specific audio stuff that I've done before, I would always look at it, though, in terms of what do I have to do to make my job absolutely bulletproof. So I'm going to be recording on location, and I'm going to be probably giving someone a feed to send out. For me, even if everything goes to heck in a handbasket going out, I still want my record of that event to be locked. Right. And so I have to have something internally to make sure that I'm not relying on them if I want to get away from that building with the correct sound, which is my job in that case.
I think one of the things you're pointing towards is also having multiple ways of getting out. So it's not just having two ways out with two encoders. So for instance, for most of the larger events that we do, we have fiber or tertiary, satellite, cellular, these are all, and they all have their own paths out of the system, so that it's, if the lines get cut, or it's a rainy day, or it's there's all kinds of different ways that we can get out. For instance, with the Michael Krasny show for graymatter.show, I am recording in Audio Hijack. That's the main one that I send to Jeff to edit. But I'm also recording on a Mix Pre, an entirely different pipeline, and we're also recording in Zoom. so there's a bunch of different ways that there's a bunch of different fallbacks if one system fails. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think everybody has pointed out media is an important one to back up, that we have multiple places things are recorded, so we always have it. We can always grab that. And then another thing to think about is if the power goes out in the venue, does the event stop? So if the lights go out, then you don't need to back that up if the event is going to stop because of a power failure. You can put your energies into redundancy elsewhere. If the event is still continuing, how do you get around it? And sometimes that's a fallback to a completely separate redundant camera and audio feed that you can, even if it's just a locked wide shot, that you can patch around and use.
Yeah, there's been a couple shows that I've worked on where we backed all of our stuff up. We backed our routers up. We backed the internet connection up. We backed everything else up. We were in the Excel convention hall in London, and our entire event went down. They ran out of power, and the only thing that was left up there, I think I have a picture somewhere of it, of just our monitors up, and we were like, we'll be right back, slide up. And that's job security. When you're dealing with a client, they're like, everything else went down, and we have the we'll be right back slide up, and we're still running. It was not a good day for the show. It was a good day for our reputation there. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly. Like Jeff mentioned about do you really need to have a redundancy for your power if your entire venue will go out anyway? And what Alex mentioned about being able to put a coming back slide up is highly valuable, and this is also a very good argument for either fully producing in the cloud, and I'm sure Guy would thumb that up, or if not producing fully in the cloud, having your final switcher before your distribution be in the cloud, so you can do that switch over to a coming back slide.
And we've also done it where we have a central control somewhere that those feeds are actually going to that central control, and we're sitting there on a switcher, able to add that slide, able to switch from one source to another very, very quickly. And the only advantage there is sometimes the latency is a little lower, for us to do that, and we have a couple more hardware options to do that. So, but both of those, having, whether it's the cloud or another central control, it's having somewhere else other than the venue, a place where you can go, is really important. Next question.
Next one comes from Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I've just brought some holiday footage back, shot in 360 spherical on an Insta360 OneRS. I want to edit it down on my MacBook Pro using DaVinci Resolve Studio. Can anyone recommend a workflow that'll help me do it efficiently?
I don't know a good workflow to take the core spherical footage and put it into Resolve and actually get it out. You could probably map it onto a sphere inside of Fusion and make those adjustments. I just don't think it would render as well. I think that, there's a software that Insta360 makes, and I think you're going to be better off. You're going to have to make your choices there. Now, what you may want to do is cut the entire thing together spherically in Resolve, making decisions, maybe put it in and have it be rough of what you want. You can put it on a sphere, you can rotate it around. There are tools, again, I haven't used the spherical tools in Resolve. I know that there are spherical tools in Final Cut and in Premiere and in After Effects. But what I will say is that you may find that the rendering overall is better out of the Insta360. You may want to rough something in your editor, but then go back and render all of those out in those positions. But I'd be a little careful of taking the raw output of that and trying to edit it in Resolve, even if you were doing some kind of transform. Go ahead, Bill.
Since you're working on a Mac and you're working in 360, I will say that back some years ago, Dashwood Cinema Solutions had a 3D suite that was really very, very, very useful in working with 360 Spherical. It ran on Macs only. Tim left that and actually went to work for Apple. And when he did, he made that tool set free for everyone. So if you want to take a look and see if you can take that 360 footage and remap it to something else, that might be a really good thing. It's on the web. It's called Dashwood Cinema Solutions 3D Suite. And there's a lot of tools in there, and they're all free now.
Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California. I'm running a corporate event. The room is 40 wide by 40 deep by 17 high. It would be during the day. I plan to rent a projector and screen for the week. Any recommendations? And his budget is about $500 for both pieces.
Courtney?
Not sure about rental prices in your neighborhood. You're going to be cutting it close with $500 for the week. If you get them to do a 3-day week, you might be able to do it. As far as projector, depends on whether you have control over the light in the room. Is it a closed off room with or does it have windows in it? If it has windows in it, you're going to need a very bright projector. Something like an EK308, which is about a 6,000 lumen projector. May want to stack 2 of those to give you 12,000 lumens if you have a lot of ambient light in the room. Probably want to look for a 10-foot or a 12-foot screen. It depends on what you're showing on the screen, whether it's going to be for iMag. With only a 17-foot high ceiling, you want to get the screen up at least 6 feet off the ground, or 6 feet above the stage, if there's going to be a little stage put at one end of the room, to get it above the heads of the people that are speaking so that they're A, not blocking the projection, and B, if you're using it for iMag, there's not video feedback if you're putting a live image up there on the screen. Those are my suggestions. Rentals, it might be tough to rent it for that price. Barco projectors are much more expensive and have much higher lumens output if you have to put it into a well-lit room that has windows.
Go ahead, Marty.
Courtney covered the most important parts, how much ambient light is there going to be, what size screen and how bright a projector. But within those parameters, there are some of the finer points. In a 40-foot by 40-foot room, is there going to be a dais table for panelists to sit at? And where is that going to be along the wall? And how much room is going to be left for a projection screen? In that size room, a projection screen would not be a pop-up. It would be one that's on a frame that you would have to assemble, stretch the screen out, and then you would want to put a dress kit around it, which is black velvet. All of this would come with the rental screen. You want to figure out how much room there is for a screen. That will determine the size of the screen. And then where are you going to put the projector in the room? That's going to be important because you need to know what kind of lens you want to have on that projector. And you would do this by looking for a throw distance calculator. You can find one on Projector Central. So you want to make sure that at whatever distance the projector is, that you will be able to fill the screen with the image, and whether that's wide enough or narrow enough if the projector is in the back of the room.
Yeah, one thing you want to think about is make sure to at $500 you need a projector where you can control the light. So you need to be able to control those windows there, because you're not going to have a projector with enough lumens to really compete with light at that price. So definitely think about that. Think about the size of the screen. I think you can have a very hard time with $500. You should probably contact me. I might have something in my garage. So anyway, you're close enough that I'm sure we could figure out a trade. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. How could I use my Synology NAS to effectively get all my Google content off the cloud continuously? And he's talking Google Drive, Google Photos, Takeouts, G+, Gmail, calendars, contacts, and so forth.
Good guy.
Yeah, part of this may be a manual process. The automated part of it is Google Drive. You can get that to manually sync, and that's a pretty simple process. In your Synology, you just go over to the Packet Center. You'll search for Cloud Sync. open up Cloud Sync, and then on the left side, you'll hit this little plus sign, create, and then you can sync your Dropbox and your Google Drive. You can see mine are syncing right now. The things that it doesn't pick up, though, are your Gmail, your photos. Those are going to have to be a manual process as far as I know. I'm sure somebody has some IFT or some kind of workaround to make it work. There's lots of little doodads out there that will automatically create processes, but as far as automated with the Synology, with Cloud Sync, I don't think that it's possible to get the rest of your contacts, and I wouldn't even want it to do that. So I think it's a manual process. So yeah, because it's pretty deep, your privacy stuff. You don't want automated stuff getting into your email that easily. So yeah, I would do a little more searching on the web and see what you could find, how other people are using it.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what Guy said. The Cloud Sync package from Synology could sync down your Google Drive, or actually it could go bi-directional. But for all the other Google services, you'd want to use Google Takeout, which is a one-time large archive that actually gives you a little, not a little, but quite a large zip file of all your Google data, including your photos, your email, your contacts, and all of that comes with a Google Takeout.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tommy Schatz in St. Paul, Minnesota. I just reviewed last year's IBC breakdown PDF and was curious if there's something you have to share for what you plan on the upcoming show. What changes, upgrades, or reductions for this is happening for the setups?
Yeah, we're going to be doing a show on March 15th. We'll be talking about what our approach is going to be. So we will be about a month out, and there's a couple details that are still coming in, but we should have most of those details in this week, actually, and we're having a lot of success related to support. So stay tuned for that. But some of what we do is going to be dependent on some of the support that we're getting, bandwidth, and a little bit of work, a little bit of help to put things up, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned for that. But we do think that we'll have some pretty interesting things to show at NAB. We have a booth at NAB, so we're excited about being able to do interviews. And one of the big things, I think, one of the big changes is we're kind of taking some of the stuff we've done in the past, like what Guy did at CES, and we're putting it in the booth. So basically, when we have people getting interviewed, when we bring them to that booth, there's going to be a big old screen there for them to talk to the panel. So the panel is actually going to be asking questions of the person there. It's not going to be another host sitting next to them or anything else. So that's one of the changes that we're making, is to improve on some of the stuff that we think worked, and then we'll have at least one live view that's roaming around taking stuff, and then we're also looking at some wireless solutions that could cover as much as half of the central hall. So that would allow us to have a low latency two-way connection so that we could actually do interviews with wireless. And these are not probably, we'll see which wireless system, but one of the wireless systems we work at works at about a half mile. So we'll take a look at what that looks like, but we'll have more information for you on March 15th. I think that's a Friday, and that's when we're going to talk about it. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Next one comes from James Babbitt here in San Diego. What audio leveler for a DAW do you recommend? I'm editing a lecture by a teacher which has comments made by students seated around the room. I have Adobe Audition and iZotope RX and Ozone.
Mickey?
Yeah, I think my solution for this, which is available in every single DAW, is what we call the fader. So you can move your levels up and down by moving these faders, or alternatively, you can also adjust keyframes to adjust the volume. That is my my tool of choice for leveling.
Good, Jeff.
It's funny, and I must appreciate Mickey's dedication to excellence. That is certainly that will give you the best outcome. And Mickey and I have discussed this. If time is a factor and you don't have time to do it that way, there are some automated tools. It's not going to be perfect. So you do have to decide which is more critical, the time you're going to spend on this versus the final product. But I'll show it. By the way, if you have RX, and you didn't mention if they're on separate tracks, I assume you don't have the luxury of the the audience mic or however you were capturing feedback to be on a separate track, then of course you normalize that track to the same levels, and then you have to deal with noise. But if not, if you have RX Advanced, and I'll just show you that real quick, certainly more expensive, and I wouldn't buy it for this, but there's a leveler. So it actually has a leveler as part of RX Advanced, and that will do what you're talking about. If not, I'll show one other, and this is from Waves. This is pretty good. I have this, and I dabble with it. It's not perfect, so you will get some instances that are not great, and you do have to play with some of these settings. But for what it's worth, they have some presets like YouTube. And so in other words, you put this on your audio chain at the end, and you'll get levels and everything else optimized for YouTube. And it's real-time stereo or mono. So and you just set your target levels or use one of the presets. So there are some automated options or the bespoke method.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to highly recommend that you spend as much time thinking about capturing the audio as you do about post-processing. And here's what I mean. I used to do a lot of work for the National Speakers Association, and I was in these situations a lot where I had an audience, sometimes small, sometimes medium, sometimes large, and a person on the stage mic'd, and we were trying to get the crowd questions. Unless there's a microphone they can walk up to, I don't think there was one circumstance in all the years that I did that I was ever truly happy with. The difference between somebody on mic and somebody 60 feet away from a microphone shouting out a question is just dramatic. And even pumping up the volume of that sound so that you can hear that question from the audience, it's just so radically different. There's a lot of solutions. I mean, they actually make microphones in foam balls that you can throw out to people. They have people in the audience handing around mics. Some people use booms and things like that. The point is to get mics to the people who are asking these questions, or you will probably not be satisfied with the bounce back and forth between question and answer. My 2 cents.
Even on a show that where all we're doing is answering questions, that there's only typically 15 to 20 questions. So I would lean heavily towards thinking about answering, going in and doing this more by hand than by automation, just because there's just not that many edits. If you were doing with an all day, if you're looking at 8 hours a day, 3 days of that, and you have to get it out in a day, I think that a filter is great because it's going to be better than nothing. But if you're talking about taking a 1 hour class or a 2 hour class and cutting it up, it's just not that many edits. You're talking about a time frame of 20 or 30 minutes to just kind of pull things together to make that actually work. So I would highly recommend by hand if it's short, but I understand that definitely if it's long, processing everything just because it has to get out. So those are the two things I would think about on top of what's been said so far. Okay, go ahead, Mickey.
Does anyone know, by the way, does Adobe Audition not have a leveler?
They all of them have some kind of leveler. So yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. If you have like proper controller, like a physical fader controller, you can pretty much do it almost in real time. Just play it back, ride the faders as you go along.
And usually I can see, like if I'm looking at it, when I've done this in the past where we've had two-way, I can just look at the waveform and see where the students are talking or where someone in the audience is talking, and I just go click, 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 click. I don't even have to. I can do it much faster than real time because I'm going through and you can just see the levels change dramatically. In that you may still have to listen to it quickly, spot check it, but I think oftentimes that works pretty well as well. Go ahead, Jeff.
I know in Pro Tools there's a strip silence feature that allows you to make edits based on level, and you're not looking to strip away, but you could actually select everything that's below a certain level, move it to another track, and put all your processing for the questions on that track. So, huge amounts of gain, noise reduction, all those sorts of things, and leave the lecturer on their own track.
And the way we fix it in most of our shows is we use something like Mukana because it eliminates all the mics in the audience. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Daniel Partridge in Rochester, Minnesota. Recent event in Hawaii paid $10,000 for an internet at a venue, and they had lots of problems. Looking for good hardware for bonded cellular backup solutions from mid to high price tags, and he wants reliable more than cheap.
Good, Mickey.
I'd say reliable would still be a hard line from the venue or a hard line that you have installed, but that would be very expensive. But a hard line from the venue would be would still be very reliable. I would say, like, if there were a lot of problems, there probably wasn't enough time for coordination with the venue and testing. But going to your question about bonded cellular, I would go with a PepWave bonded router from PepLink, along with PepLink's own Speed Fusion software to handle the bonding at the far end.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The PepWave with the Speed Fusion. There's also some other options as far as, don't be afraid to call up the local providers and have a line dropped in. I mean, you'd be surprised at how cheap it is to have Comcast or one of these guys that are a local provider. It's a matter of just banging on the phone and having a guy. I mean, this was one event we did recently in Austin. They had a guy up on the pole the hours before the event, stringing the line right down, and that was just our backup. And then we asked the neighbors. That's the other thing, is don't be afraid to go over and ask the neighbors. They gave us a 1 gig connection as well, so we had multiple connections. So we had the venues, 2 connections, the neighbors, and we brought in another line. So, I mean, that's 4. It just depends on the event and how hardcore you want to be. The other one is multiple Starlinks. You can get 2 Starlinks and then fire one up a little bit later. So you don't have them both tracking the same satellite. You have one that you start about a minute or 2 later, and that way it picks up on a separate one. So that way when one falls out, and again, using a bonded PepLink solution, that way the 2 are tied together. And then there's also this pop-up one that you can use, or a LiveView LU800. You could rent an LU800 from LiveView directly, and that'll have 8 modems inside of it. So that's another option as well.
And the LiveView, it depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're just doing general internet, then that's one set of things. And bonded, a lot of other solutions may solve your problem. If you're dealing with low latency two-way, you have to be very careful of bonded, because the jitter tends to cause all kinds of frame problems. So that you do need a pretty solid internet connection to make things like Zoom work well. If you want if you're just doing streaming, we've used LiveViews as backups for a long time. You can get an extender, so you can extend that LiveView from 8 modems to 14, I think, and it looks like a little saucer that you can run outside the building as well. So that's another thing that you can expand to it. What we've also done with that is get a KA satellite uplink, and what we do is we put that in as the Ethernet to the LiveView. And that's going to be much more expensive than the Starlink, but it's much more reliable. It still has problems with clouds. So as you start to go, if you need more than that, you're going to add latency, but you can also look at putting a buck on a satellite. So a KU or C-band can give you 40 megs or 100 megs that are going to go, like a C-band truck with a buck is going to give you 100 megs a second, or can, and that's going to go through everything, to make that happen. The most reliable, when we absolutely positively have to get something out, is we work out getting the switch in there. So we put the switch in. We're going to get uncompressed bandwidth coming out. We can put what's called an MMC circuit on top of that, and that's going to give us up to 1 gig of connectivity. That is fiber, and it's private fiber. They can't always do it, and they need sometimes 60 days to do that. So you have to get ahead of it to make that happen. Overall, when something matters with the internet, we typically bring in a company to manage that. And the company that we typically use is out of LA. They're called Straight Up Technologies. And we've used them, they've hired us to do stuff like the Open, which is something they work on. But if you look at Dreamforce and you think about, there's 130,000 people with Wi-Fi that works, that's Straight Up Technologies. And so that's what just makes that go away. And then they just give you internet and it will work. Next question.
A. Schultz in Los Angeles is up next. Has anyone on the panel used the Teradek Bolt system or other wireless systems equivalent to include in a live stream production, looking for use with a Sony Fx3 alongside of wired FR7s?
Okay.
Yeah, so this comes down to if you're going to buy it or if you're going to rent it, and how big are the stakes, and do you feel comfortable running a line very close to where the transmission will be? So 2 ways to look at it. One is you can run a wire really, really far and really, really close, and that way you can get a cheaper version, because the Rangers from Teradek will go over a mile. And then there's repeater systems, so you could have them actually hop to hop to hop. In this event here, we used 3 of them, and we rented them. We had one up here in the sky. This was a Cyclone. This thing, it was an FX6, and just like what you're talking about, we had FR7s on the ground, cabled SDI. And then here you can see the tree with 3 of the bolts up here. I don't recommend this configuration. Having them this close is not. I wanted to pull these down because we had some breakup on the Steadicam. So we had an FX6 on a Steadicam, and we did experience some breakup. So that's the thing to watch out for, is just line of sight means line of sight. That means you can see the antennas. They can see them, and not people in the way, because people are just bags of water. And so that sounds kind of mean. For transmission, it'll soak up that signal. And we're at a wedding where the people stood up and it just dropped the signal with an inexpensive wireless, and it was heartbreaking because it was live. So just be aware that humans in the way, if you can rehearse with the humans there, that would be better, but we didn't have the full venue packed. And so there's a couple things to watch out for. Rent if you can, because the powerful ones are expensive. If you're going to buy, just run a cable if you can and get as close as you can, and avoid wireless if you don't have to. I mean, the Steadicam, we had to do it. The one up in the air, we had to do it because the thing's rotating. The third one was a cable cam that I was running, and it had to be wireless as well. So it's just a matter of where you need to be. And the one that we had on the cable cam was flawless, but the Steadicam one took some hits during the show.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, reliability is not their strong point. I've worked all the time with these on the set for video assist, but that's not a crucial connection. It's just for viewing live from the video camera while you're shooting, but you're not recording the output of that. The bolts, the Bolt 6s, I think we worked with a lot. Weren't we using, I don't know if we were using the super strong ones that Guy was talking about when we did Cinegear. Alex can talk about that. Rangers. Those were the Rangers, the more expensive ones.
I think one was a Ranger, and I think the other one was a 1500. I think, but yeah, okay. Still both pretty good. Yeah,
the LT750s, they're fairly cheap. 2700 for a receiver transmitter pair. And it depends. They'll go about 500 feet. I wouldn't want to use them any further than that. They are definitely line of sight, as Guy said. You want to get them up in the air, and if your camera's stationary, you have a much better chance of maintaining a stable signal than if your camera's moving because of multipath and people blocking it. So you want to keep the receiver up in the air so that it has line of sight to the transmitter at all times without going through any persons or metal objects. But I think you can do it. It depends on how far you want to be away.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, as Courtney mentioned, the Bolt product line is really designed more towards monitoring on set, like for a narrative or recorded production, as opposed to for live. The product line from Teradek for live is the Ranger. Do note that the Bolt gives you about 50 to 100 milliseconds of latency. So if you are cutting between wireless cameras and also wired cameras, you have to take the discrepancy in the latency into account there. And so sync will have to be figured out. What do you prioritize in terms of sync, the wired or the wireless? If it is a particularly RF heavy environment, the latency can go up to about 150, 170 milliseconds because it has to add more buffer to take into account the frequency hopping that it does. So as with anything that's wireless, always coordinate frequencies with any department that's running wireless equipment, be that the comms, wireless mics. You have to make sure people do not step on each other with both their primary frequencies and also the intermodulation products they produce. With regards to what Guy mentioned earlier about making sure there's line of sight, antenna placement and antenna design, choosing the correct types of antennas. So sometimes you want an omni, sometimes you want a directional antenna. Keep that in mind when you are designing your wireless systems.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Eric Hertz in Hartford, Connecticut, from yesterday's discussion of Twitch pulling out of Korea and Netflix partnering with SK Broadband. What's the fate of YouTube, which is Korea's biggest source of traffic? Who pays?
I think YouTube's going to pay. YouTube has the money to stay in the market. I think Twitch decided not to spend the money to stay in the market, and now they have to pay some fine. I think they got fined $200 and some $1,000 this week because they pulled out. But I think they're also trying to make a point that they don't think that they should be having to pay what they're being charged for here. But I don't think YouTube is going anywhere. I think this is a really a great opportunity in a dense gaming market for them to take some market share. So I think that they're going to take advantage of that opportunity. If you've got questions, of course, you can throw those into Makana. Make sure to vote on the questions. It's not guaranteed we'll get to the bottom of them. Now, if you're watching this later and you're not in Makana, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can use that 24/7. So anytime you see this video and you've got a question popping into your head, go ahead and throw it in there and we'll throw it into the next show. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota says, we lost our stream at our house of worship again this last week. Comcast said that the system was up throughout the service. Our speed was 15 up at the start. Where should I look for the cause of the stream drop? OBS?
Marty?
Well, so there are two parts to this. There's the outside network, and then there's the inside network. And you have to look at both of them. If your inside network is a flat network where your office computers and your Wi-Fi and all your guests and your phones are all on one network, then you're going to be limiting the bandwidth that's available for your stream. So look at the inside network where that you have at least a VLAN, if not a separate network just for your stream that gets out to your internet connection.
Good, Nikki.
Yeah, I don't know if your router or your gateway has logging, and specifically like quite verbose logging enabled. If you do, you can maybe, depends on how detailed the logs are, you can maybe trace back and see where the disconnect is happening. Is the gateway actually getting a request from your encoder, or is it somewhere down the line outside of your internal network? When the downtime occurs, it would also be helpful to perhaps start a trace route from inside your network and see at which hop you lose connection on the way to your CDN.
Yeah, and the one thing is with that little amount of bandwidth, you're really going to want to take control of that network. And so what I would request is at the WAN, when it comes out of that modem, I want to put a router there. That's the streaming router. And you're going to slice off bandwidth and hand it back to the house. If you're doing a 1080p stream, you're going to want 12 megs. You get 12 of that 15 up, and you give 3 back to the house. And if they don't like that, they shouldn't be streaming. So the thing is that they need to have, and every time what you do is you recommend that, and then every time it fails, you remind them that there's a solution, and you just kind of wear people down. like this is happening because we don't have control of that. We're not doing this. And every time, why is this happening? Because I don't have a router right there to control that. And if that, so that's what you want to do is constantly be looking for getting control of the content as it reaches the building. Next question.
Next one comes from Peter Johansson in Sweden. And we will be stuck in a proprietary timecode communication mess. Will we be stuck in that? Or do you think there will ever be a standardized broadcast protocol for decent interoperability?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I was under the impression there already was a standard broadcast protocol for timecode. SMPTE timecode has been established for many, many years as a standard interoperable timecode format. There are master timecode clocks from Evertz that you can get for distribution within a facility that sends tri-level sync and timecode to all of your units that accept tri-level sync. And you can use that as a interoperable timecode master clock to feed everything. Maybe you're talking about synchronization over, lip sync over home units, and that really doesn't necessarily have anything to do with timecode. It usually has to do with buffering delays in the receiver and transmitter and so on, with different frame rates and different sample rates, et cetera, not necessarily tied to SMPTE time.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I just want to second what Courtney said, SMPTE timecode over LTC.
Bill?
Yeah, that's all true. Just remember, there are different frame rates in different markets. The U.S. standard NTSC 2997 for broadcast, it may not be the same as other CCAM and CSAC and other times, so just know what you're dealing with. But yeah, timecode is pretty universal. At least everybody knows how to deal with it.
Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles says, any of the panelists have experience with the Audio Technica BP3600 Immersive Audio Microphone?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, the 3600 has been, I think, for the past year and a half, 2 years, the new like standard ambisonic mic that people go to. It used to be the Ambio, which is for the longest time like what people like default to, similar to like an SM58 for a handheld or a 416 for a shotgun. It used to be the Ambio in terms of ambisonics. Now it seems like it has shifted towards a 3600.
The 3600's second order, is that right?
Yes, it is 8 capsules, and it comes in this sphere which has connectors on it, and then you just plug in the multiple capsules into it, and it looks like this like a sea urchin almost. We had the first time I had the opportunity to test it out was in 2021 in Tokyo, and at that time they only had prototypes out in the field for us, and all the wind protection was 3D printed for that because it was still like in the prototype phase, and it with a wind basket was larger than a basketball, which is funny.
How would we, like, if we were going to use a mic like this for, let's say, NAB, how would we embed those 8 channels back in and send it back, those raw, do the same thing we've done in the past. We send the raw channels back and then do the conversion from ambisonic to 5.1 on the other side. But you would still theoretically be able to do that with the embedding that we've done in the past, right?
Yeah. If we're going to do it similarly, wherein the mix is happening at an off-site control room, then you would want to transport all those raw ambisonic A format tracks, channels down without any processing. Do it at the board. I know, well, in the past for the office hour stuff, we've been decoding it within Pro Tools, but I know Lavo has built-in decoding for this specific Audio-Technica microphone.
Interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting device. It has 8 microphones built into it. It has an umbilical cable. It has various options for wind protection, and comes in a nice little case. And it has 8 analog outputs, so you can plug it into whatever interface you want to. As Mickey was saying, it probably is a fairly often used. I can't claim to have experience with it myself. But
go ahead, Jeff.
Looking at this, I haven't used it, but that to me is not second-order ambisonics because the mics are not coincident. They're all spaced away from the center of the ball. So I kind of look at it as a bunch of near-coincident stereo arrays, all pointing in different directions. So you have 2 hypercardioids that are 6 inches apart, 15 centimeters, and sort of 70 degrees between them. And so you could kind of think of it as a up front and an up rear and a down front and a down rear, but it's all the same dimensions. So you could also think of it as a right up and a right down stereo pair and a left up and a left down stereo pair. So I think you could use this. You could take outputs of this and directly pan them without having to go through an ambisonics decode, because it does add in the time of arrival difference that you get from having mics spaced apart. So it has both amplitude differences because they're hypercardioids, and it has time of arrival differences.
Yeah, on their website, they actually highlight the fact that the position of the microphones, are mirrors the ambient speaker channels for standard 514. So that it's interesting. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, they do have a decoding plugin there, which I guess time aligns them so that they sort of it emulates coincident capsules. So I haven't tried running it through without decoding.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. Would there be a rack mount channel strip, a mic preamp with EQ and dynamics, that can be controlled via MIDI or USB for parameter recall?
Good, Mickey. I'm sorry, not Mickey, Marty.
Well, you don't say. How many channels do you need, Douglas, for microphone inputs? Most USB interfaces would have software control over parameters, and you can even do presets and such. If you need more than one or two channels, you could do an XR18, or you could do something like the Mo2 stage box, which is an AVB network box with 16 inputs and looks like 8 outputs. There are a variety of different ways to do this, depending on how many mic pre's you need.
Good, Mikey. Mickey.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with a box that's just a channel strip that can be controlled via MIDI or USB. That's just one rack unit. But there are quite a few full-on audio interfaces that can do this. Not only not only act as a preamp, but have the connectivity to interface with the computer, as well as have outputs as well. Like, say, an example would be, like, say, the Apollo line from Universal Audio. They have a lot of models that are one rack unit that are quite powerful, that have quite good preamps and also have powerful DSP built in.
And would you include the Midas, what used to be the X32 core, but the Midas core is something that you could do a lot of control, because that's pretty much a full X32 mixer with a handful of, I don't know I guess it's only Dante inputs. It doesn't have a lot of analog inputs.
Yeah, Douglas specifically mentions a channel strip, which right. in my mind, the channel strip would include a preamp inside, so those M32 or X32 core units only have digital I/O in them.
That's correct. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, I think what Douglas is looking for is possibly an all analog, or maybe with an A to D converter at the end of it, processing, mic pre and processing that is remote controlled. And I believe I've seen one, but I'm going to need to look to find it to see the actual product. But it's a pretty rare bird.
Go ahead, next question.
Fred Kapar in Kent, in England. After yesterday's question about a high-quality streaming cameras, anyone have thoughts and opinions about the Opal C1? Looks interesting, albeit a little bit spendy, and he's got a link there to it. Courtney?
Yeah, I took a look at the specs. I haven't have one. I did have the MCOS, which this looks amazingly like, that doesn't have microphones. It's the first professional webcam. Well, so there's a lot of hype there. I looked at the specs, and not that great. The microphones, they say they have this mic array, which if you look at it, the sensor's a 4K sensor 60, and the lens is a fixed focal length lens and probably fixed focus lens. The microphone, there's only 3 microphones in there, and they're MEMS, sorry about that, and they're MEMS type microphones, and they only go from 100 to 10,000 hertz. So great for voices, not good for anything else. So I'd stay away from this. I think you'd be much better off with our old favorite, the 360 Link, Insta360 Link, which is even cheaper. It's only $249. The other one is $300. And this one has a gimbal to get out the shake and remote control over it. So much better choice.
Good guy.
Yeah, what Courtney said, I had one of these on order, and then when I looked at the specs, and I already own an Insta360, it was just one of those things where the larger sensor wins out, and plus the ability to use the gimbal. So yeah, especially since they dropped the price from $299 to $249, the Insta360 is the absolute winner. We've got 10 of them out in kits, so they're winners. They're stable and they work.
Next question.
Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Do you own a photo printer? And if so, what do you use? I need a quick way to generate 4x6 photo prints. Thanks.
Good, Bill.
It depends on whether you're looking for quality or convenience. The thing that used to get me, I've had maybe 6 or 7 different photo printers and bought special paper for them. The ink cartridges are extraordinarily expensive when you get into those 6-color ink arrays and things like that. We actually moved a long time ago to Epson's that use the EcoTank because it just dropped the cost of ink dramatically. It is a medium quality printer, though. So if you're looking for archival photos, it's not where I'd go. There are better solutions for more resolution. But if you're concerned about the cost of ink, I'd never buy something where you have to go to Costco and buy those huge packs of ink again. I just wasted way too much money on that.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. The ink cartridges are, where they rake you over the coals for prices. I just bought the Canon Ink Tank printer, a Pixma G7020. They're about $230. but they have ink tanks, and I can keep a whole year's worth of ink in there because it comes with a set of bottles of ink. The heads are replaceable. With the ink tank, you don't use up half of your ink cartridge, just cleaning the head every now and then. It does print pretty decent prints, but it's a 4-color printer: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Not the more professional printers have intermediate colors beyond that, light cyan, light yellow, light magenta, etc. 6-color printers for printing out stuff. But for 4x6 prints, this should do fine for you.
Yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, I have some professional Epson printers that have a lot of ink and a lot of ink costs and so on and so forth. Most of my work, when you say 4x6s, and you're doing them trying quickly, most of my work has got a budget connected to it. So oftentimes we just have little printers that we want to put on site. If you're looking for one that's portable, I've used this one in the past and has been fairly effective. This is the Canon Selfie. You're going to buy a bunch of. We just buy stacks of cartridges for it. It works great, and it's really small. It sits on a desk, and if you're on site, you want to put something together. That tends to work really well. My daughter I got this actually to test, and I had my daughter test it. She was looking for something fun. So if you're looking for something fun, this is the Fujifilm Instax Mini Link, and it looks like little Polaroid pictures, and they're smaller than 4x6, but they're cute, and you can put them in your little in your diary. Next question.
Very expensive to print on that paper.
It is, and it's for fun. Yeah, we're not doing them in mass. Next question.
EJ from Sunnyvale, California has the next QR code question. Is there a faster way to utilize complex motion graphics out of After Effects in Ross Xpression than having to painstakingly do this? And he's got a link there, so that must be the workflow.
I don't know of a faster way. I actually reached out to someone at Ross and wasn't able to get a response fast enough. But we'll keep on taking a look at that to find out if there's a faster way to do it. But I think that right now, what you outlined there is probably the way to get it done. I have to admit that most of the times when we've worked with Xpression, the folks that work with us have tended to build everything in Xpression, so that building it natively. You start with After Effects as a guide, and you build out what you want. So you have the artists build out what they want, but then the Xpression artist comes in and rebuilds it, with all the raw assets, and it tends to work a lot. It tends to save you a lot of time as you do it over and over again. If you're only doing it once, it's not great. If you're doing it for a football game for a season, it's great. So just think about that. Next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach and here on the panel says Bloomberg TV Studios going for a podcast-style look and sound with Heil mics, big mic arms. Thoughts on their rig? And he's got the link.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I took a look at this video, and it seems like they're trying to get better audio in field applications where they're in highly reverberant spaces. So if you look at like the first two scenes, the first one is a Bloomberg person asking a question, and the second is a person answering the question wearing a lav microphone, and the audio difference is pretty spectacularly different, with a lav microphone being highly reverberant, and the microphone the Heil microphone that's on a big stand that's right in front of the questioner is a lot drier. This is going to take a lot more setup time to do. But it's probably worth it. And they don't have they don't have a second sound person to hold a boom microphone there.
Yeah. Go, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, what struck me about this, and there are two hosts seemingly in the same studio. I'm showing one of them right now. But to me, this is very deliberate. I mean, that's what strikes me. TV studios are a known entity. This seems very conscious and intentional. I mean, they even chose the mic boom arm with the big, light on it. They didn't have to. That's conscious. That's deliberate. The third person, that's Mark Gurman. He's presumably in a different location, self-mic'd. But these guys, that's what's fascinating. This seems to be intentional. And I couldn't find, at least easily, any other clip from them. This is just yesterday with this setup. So that's why it struck me as being curious.
Do you think this is the studio, or is this a location?
No,
but there's two hosts.
I think,
when I saw the other host, I thought maybe green screen, but
no. Those are not. That's just a. He's in an insert studio. Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney. Can't hear you, Courtney.
Muted.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Mickey?
I didn't raise my hand on that by accident. There you
For that, I think a concern, like if I were mixing those broadcasts, a concern I would have is training or retraining rather the presenters to make sure they are on point with their placement with the mic, because a broadcast, the dynamic microphone like that would be a lot less forgiving than a lavalier that's mounted on their person. So I'd be concerned about that, and also just watching half a minute of the video. Their studios just sound bad. So garbage in, garbage out. It's a highly reflective studio. Doesn't sound like there's much in terms of treatment of the room. So no matter what they do, even if they switch over to these dynamic microphones for all the presenters, you will lessen the amount of reflections that you would capture, but it will still be there, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, and labs are pretty unforgiving. I don't think labs sound good in a sound studio, let alone a broadcast area. If you close your eyes and watch almost any broadcast, they sound horrible. And you can hear the whole set all the time. Like just watch any like Sunday morning discussion and just close your eyes and listen to the studio, and you'll hear everything that's there. And that's what those labs are doing. So I think that they took that and they augmented it by having a glass studio, which is like the worst possible thing that you can do to your studio. And so I'm sure that I bet you labs were probably unlistenable in that room. And someone who thought that looked good, this is what happens. You have architects that think looks good, and they realize it didn't sound good. Now, they probably could fix a lot of that by taking moving blankets like I have here and wrapping them in the areas that you don't see. It would probably dampen a lot of the reflection around it, but I do think that that's probably what they had to do to fix this, to make that actually work. But it is, as said before, it's garbage in, and you can only mitigate it to some degree, because it's kind of it's a disastrous location. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to add, I guess, like my own opinion. Like labs don't necessarily sound bad. It's just how much care the production puts into sound. Like as mentioned by Alex earlier, it's not forgiving, but given a good environment, like say for example, Les Miserables, from the film from 2012, mixed by Simon Hayes. Majority of the vocals in that film was recorded live on set. Majority of them through lavaliers, large DPA lavaliers. So, but there was a lot of concerted effort there by the entire production to make sure those lavs sound good. So it's not so much that lavs sound bad. It's more of it has to be in it's less forgiving about being in not good sounding rooms.
I think they're just challenged with a physics problem. They're a small aperture and they're usually pretty far away from the voice, and so they just generally those things make it very difficult for them to work well. They're not always bad, but most of the time. So anyway, next question.
Austin Corson in Portland, Oregon. Anyone thinking of buying a new Red Bull drone? He's got the link to it.
Go ahead, Nigel.
I don't think you can buy this drone. This drone was built specially by a Dutch drone team. I suspect for Red Bull to promote the F1 season first race this weekend. What was fun about the video, which I actually watched yesterday, was they really struggled to follow an F1 car, which means they have to get above 200 miles an hour to roughly 300 kilometers an hour. And they were really struggling to follow the backup driver before they did Max Verstappen, who was the world champion. So they went to Red Bull, and they went to the Red Bull F1 factory, which most of us will never see inside of. And they got it up to 300 kilometers an hour because they did the aerodynamics, they redesigned it, they rebuilt it for them. But I don't think you could probably buy that.
Next question.
Next question comes from Jeff Francis, Columbia, South Carolina. I found the remote control channel strip for which I was searching.
All right, go ahead, Jeff, real quick.
So back to Douglas Carmichael's question. This is the Neve 8801. And so it has a USB output that connects to a computer to capture the settings. It's an all analog box. There's an optional A to D converter. When you go to restore your settings, everything that's a switch comes back. You have to physically move the knobs to the right position. Then the software confirms that for you, all for the low price of $3,500 for one channel preamp. Dynamics processing, EQ. That does not include the A to D converter. That's extra, but boy, it's a Neve.
Just a quick reminder that we have, we're talking about the Eclipse tomorrow. We're really excited to have Graham Jones and Ann Buckley here, that'll be here tomorrow. It's going to be a great show about covering the Eclipse and what to pay attention to. So stay tuned for that show tomorrow morning. Welcome back, and we are now talking about field recording, and we've got a couple people here that have done a little bit of field recording, and so and one thing that we're distinguishing here is so a lot of what we talk about is studio recording. So we're talking about whether it's in our personal studios, whether it's in larger studios, we have live events, but the rules change pretty dramatically when we start going out into the field. So now we have a different kind of set of mics, a different set of recorders, a different set of, how we manage power, how we manage all these bits and pieces. And so we thought that it would be useful for us, and we've got a lot of questions stacking up already. So if you're a panelist, please go ahead and raise your hand if you want to say a couple things up front. But it's really it is a different set of challenges to get great audio, and you only get to do it once. You don't usually get to go back. So it's really, really important to get it just right. Go ahead, Marty.
Field recording is so much different than studio recording. Being in the Washington, D.C. area and working for the network news bureaus, I would go out and I would be out all day long, and everything that I would need, I had to be wearing on my body. Right? So mixers, microphones, XLR cables, batteries, wireless gear, antennas, everything had to be worn on my body, and I'd be out all day long and not have availability to charge things up and stuff. So I had to be sure that I had everything I would need to be out and working all day long. And so everything has to be small and lightweight, and you have to have the proper bags and storage space to carry all these things. So it's quite a bit different. And you have to think about one of the major things is power. So all of your devices, how are you going to power them? And so there are small devices that can distribute power from, say, a camera battery, that you can use as one master battery instead of individual batteries in every one of your devices. Another one is, depending on how many wireless receivers you might have, you would want to have one antenna that you can then distribute that to all of your receivers. So there's a lot more to it, and I'm sure we'll get to that in some of the questions.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, I'm going to support what Marty said, particularly for me, because I was in Arizona. So the environmental temperature was always a big deal. I was either working off of a sound cart, or I was working, as Marty just noted, kind of as a run and gun with some kind of field mixer and trying to do this out with no support. And boy, you can get exhausted after a 3-hour shoot when the temperature is 114 and you're trying to work inside of that. On the other side of that, I have done a few things where you're in the extreme cold. So all of those things you don't normally deal with if you're in a studio circumstance and you've got HVAC keeping everything comfortable. So the longevity of batteries, the ability to move stands when they've gotten to be 150 degrees because they've been sitting in direct sun. I used to have to carry a lot of umbrellas to cover the sound cart to make sure that my monitors and things like that, or whatever I was working on, didn't just get ridiculously hot. So these environmental factors are a big deal for location recording.
Courtney?
Yeah, all of those are great points. The weather, the power, the portability. Sometimes if you put all your stuff on a sound cart, you have to think about, you may be going to 3 different locations in one day. And you're going to have to pack up everything, get it into a vehicle, and get it to the next location, unpack it, and be ready to go within just a few minutes. So the portability and quick setup is something that is paramount in field recording. And especially if you're not on a union shoot where you have Teamsters and trucks designed to carry your equipment from place to place, you may have to have your equipment loadable into your van quickly or car, whatever you're carrying it in, and set it up at the next location. So that's another consideration that you have to deal with. Also, going up and down stairs. I know I had sound carts that weighed 250 pounds, and getting them up to the second floor of a house that doesn't have an elevator, or the third floor of a loft that doesn't have an elevator, or the elevator's broken, can be quite challenging.
Mickey?
Yeah, when I think of field recording, I split it up into two categories. One is like primarily capturing dialogue on set, be that for unscripted reality or documentary style, ENG style productions, or for scripted. And the other category being field recording for gathering sounds, like say if you need to build up an effects library for a specific film, that is another category of field recording that I think of. ENG style, run and gun unscripted, as well as gathering effects. For me, that usually entails a bag setup where you have your recorder, your wireless receivers, all your gear, your powering in a sound bag. And you strap that on either with a harness or with a simple shoulder strap. Narrative filmmaking, in most occasions for me, would be a cart-based rig, where you have everything built into a cart. You have physical faders, linear faders to do your production mix on, and everything's pre-wired up, ready to go. You get on set, you throw down your cables for your antennas, and for your microphones, and you're good to go.
Let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
First one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Appleton, Wisconsin. And Tlaloc says, what is the best mic setup for a two-person on-camera interview with the possibility of environmental sounds?
Good, Mickey.
If this is a sit-down interview indoors, I would typically use hypercardioids as my primary. My go-tos for that are the Shure CMC 641. That's the 6 capsule with the MK40. 6 preamp with the MK41 capsule. But since you mentioned specifically that there's possibility of it not being a controlled environment, I would most likely go with my other hypercardioid microphone choice, which is the Sennheiser MKH50, or its newer brother, the MKH AT50. If it is an outdoor interview, I would switch over to shotguns. My go-to for that would be the Sennheiser MKH60, or the newer version, the AT60, or the 416 is also a very reliable choice there. If ever it is like a vox pop or a man on the street interview where you have a reporter interviewing people just on the street, randomly picking people out, I would go with a Sennheiser MD46 handheld reporter microphone for that.
Good, Marty.
Yeah, two-person interview with the possibility of environmental sound. So it would be different, as Mickey said, if you were indoors versus outdoors. Indoors can have environmental sounds, as do outdoors. So one of the important things that stand out to me is that a dialogue is always mono. And so I would do my best to capture the two people separately with different microphones, depending on whether they're walking and talking or if they're standing in a stationary place or sitting down. I might use shotgun microphones. If they're walking, usually that has to default to wireless lavs. And depending on, for environmental sound, how much sound are those microphones picking up? First of all, you might not need to augment that with another microphone for environment sounds, although you can certainly capture that on a separate track or multiple tracks. If it's indoors, set up stands with shotgun microphones pointed at each person, and then separately record environmental sounds in mono or stereo or spatial as you need to.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Everything's pretty much been covered except for wind treatment. You got to be careful if you're going to talk about environmental sounds. Wind is one of the environmental sounds you don't want to be blowing on the microphone. This is a Rycote windscreen, which is great for, and there's an MKH60 inside this one, which is what Mickey was talking about for setting up on a stand outdoors as a shotgun microphone. So I would not go with much less than that if you're going to be outdoors in an uncontrolled situation, in the wind, in other words, because the wind can come up and ruin your whole day. Indoors, I agree with everyone else. Put the cardioids or hypercardioids just above the heads on stands, and I might back them up with lavs on separate channels in case anything happens, wind gusts or something happens to the boom microphones. Prefer the boom microphones over the lavs, if at all possible. And it depends on whether or not the director or camera person wants to have visible microphones. In other words, do you have to hide the lavs, or can they be visible? And that makes a difference as to how you treat them for wind, too. You want to be careful if you're outdoors that you're not getting wind on those lavs, that you have some type of furry that goes on the top of them to prevent the wind from bottoming them out.
Mickey?
Yeah, I just want to add as well, as mentioned by Courtney, I usually put the lav on the subjects as well. So I would usually use the hyper or the shotgun as my primary and the lavs as a backup. But I would multi-track all of them. But in terms of my production mix, I'll pick whatever sounds best for me right then and there. That's what I'll fade up and record as my production mix, and also feed the cameras with. In terms of stands, just to get a little into the weeds with that, for stands, I like using the Manfrotto 420 Bravo. That is a stand that has a built-in boom, so you can mount your mic directly into that boom without relying on a boom mate or a boom cradle.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from James Babbitt here in San Diego. What's the best sounding small size digital field recorder with a built-in microphone like the discontinued Sony PCM-D100?
Mickey?
I used to use the Tascam DR100 series quite a lot for this, where I just keep it in my backpack when I'm traveling. And then if I hear interesting sounds, like when I'm in another country, I'll just pull out this handheld recorder. So I've used the DR100 and also the DR100 Mark II from Tascam for that. But just recently, I think last November, I got a Tascam Porta Capture X6, and I've been pretty happy with that as well for recording on the go. Or it also acts as an audio interface with 4 XLR input, which is pretty handy.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Appleton, Wisconsin. Can you give us a typical checklist you might have for a day of recording in the field?
Good, Mickey.
So, assuming I have either my rig or my cart already built out for this, my checklist for the day-to-day production of that would be power, media, script. Assume if it's a narrative, if it's not a script. Okay, I won't say script. I'll say documentation. So that would include script or call sheet, which lays out the full production schedule. And that's important not only for scripted, but also for say, documentary shoots. And then after that would be metadata. So I would set up my recorder with all the preset my recorder with all the metadata built out already for what I can gather from the documentation. So I know, okay, we're going to be shooting all these scenes. So I'll already build that out in my recorder. So I don't have to type it out on the day. I just select everything that I preset, including the track names for all my wireless channels, all the booms. I already built out all the metadata. And I also pre-lay out the sound report for that. Of course, a lot of this may change on the day, but at least I have already built out what I know is scheduled.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I have checklists and things that I go through as I'm building out the kit, but as a last little dummy check as I'm heading out the door, I kind of think through the signal chain. Do I have microphones? Do I have mic clips? Do I have cable? Do I have stands to put them on? Do I have the recorder? Do I have media? I just kind of run, and then, monitoring. Do I have headphones? So it's the entire chain. A very quick little run through of that signal chain gives me a dummy check to confirm that as I've built this, that I've actually put everything in the bags and in the cases, whatever's going out with me.
Courtney?
Yeah, I always, since I would have a sound cart, which has everything I normally need every day on it, you don't want to check your expendables, which are your, SD cards or memory cards that you're turning in. A lot of the recorders have built-in hard drives, so you may not have to worry about getting out to location and not having any media with you, but you want to have removable media as well so that you can turn it in for dailies. You also want to make sure you have tape to affix things with, sticky tape of, toupee tape, the things that are used to secure lavs with. You want to make sure you have enough monitoring equipment for the people that are going to need to listen. And that frequently I run into that as a problem because the sound mixer will show up and I'll be working as a teleprompter operator and he'll have no sets of headphones for me and it'll be a noisy location and I'll have to place myself within about 5 feet of the talent to be able to hear them to run the teleprompter. So that's important. If you're on a commercial, let's say there's lots of clients and advertising agency people who all want to have their own listening device. So you have to have Comtex or personal listening devices for enough of the people there, sometimes 10 or 12. So check with the producer ahead of time and find out how many people are going to need headsets and make sure that you have enough of them to cover that range because that makes them mad more than anything else.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Since we're just going back earlier in the process, assuming like this is like the first build of either the bag of the cart for production work, I would work through inputs first, all my sources, like wiring up my boom channels, my RF channels, wiring up the antennas for the RF, and then after that, thinking through the outputs everywhere my signal has to go from my bag or from my cart. So that would be my transmitter if I'm doing a wireless hop to the camera so that they have either a reference or a broadcast quality mix going to camera. I'll wire that up. RF for the monitors that Courtney mentioned for the Video Village, for client, getting them that mix into their ears, as well as if I need to feed sometimes on set there is the DIT would have a VTR station there as well for them to be able to play back takes. So I'll take that into account in terms of setting up my outputs. After that, then I'll think through my powering, my power distribution from my battery system, either for, again, different solutions for bag use and different solution for cart use. Wiring up the battery for that, going into a battery distribution system and off to all the different devices. This is a lot easier if you have with the Nexus receiver going into an 8 series sound devices, because that's only one single power source that's powering both your recorder and mixer as well as your RF receiver for your mics. So that's a super that make it super clean inside a bag or a cart.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I just had to make sure I heard correctly. Courtney, did you say toupee tape? Is there something unique about the properties of that, of why that's handy?
Well, it's double stick tape, so it's very sticky on both sides. And you can wrap, it's used a lot in mounting lavaliers because you can wrap it around a lavalier microphone and stick it under the clothing so it will it will anchor itself to the clothing and anchor the clothing to the person so that it's not moving back and forth so you don't hear rubbing of the microphone on either chest hair or other clothing, t-shirt underneath a shirt like this, a collared shirt. So it's used quite frequently also for affixing it inside of a tie, other areas like that.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. What stereo mic setups would you suggest for the Eclipse capture in the wild?
Mickey?
I'm not sure what this recording or this capture will be used for, but my go-to for these type of things, if especially if I don't know where it's gonna go, it would be an MS setup, a mid-side microphone setup, because that would allow me to change the width and post while keeping everything mono compatible.
Go ahead, Marty.
So it depends on where you're going to be and how many people are going to be around you and what the intent of the capture is for. So during an eclipse, there is a pretty dramatic change in the environment and the acoustics of the environment. All of the insects and birds and animals will stop chirping. There's a whole change in the entire atmosphere. And it'll be interesting to see what an audio capture will be like. If you're in a very quiet environment, like if you're out in a field or something, I might put out a spaced pair of omnidirectional microphones that will allow you to capture that stereo imagery. If you're going to be where people are, or if you're going to be moving around, I would look for a stereo microphone that can be placed on a boom mic. So there are you can find from Sanken and Audio Technica, you can find stereo shotgun mics, or the Audio Technica BP4025 is a dual capsule, almost handheld microphone that is left-right. You can also find XY microphones that are also single-piece microphones that you can put on a boom.
Go, Jeff.
I'm going to second Marty's vote for a spaced A-B pair of Omnis for a very specific reason that generally Omnis are way less susceptible to wind noise than directional mics. Generally, the more directional you make a mic because of the physics of it, it becomes more susceptible to popping and wind noise. So for something that you're doing in the field, Omnis are going to give you less wind. You're still going to want wind protection from it, but you're not going to need as much as a hypercardioid or a shotgun.
Go, Bill.
Yeah, Marty really hit what I was talking about, which is the crowd. Sometimes, the last thing you want is to try to get this, and they're crying babies in the large crowd that you find yourself in. So try to find something to get away from, or above, or something to get the mics away from that noise I don't want.
Next question.
Peter Johansson in Sweden. Headphones are a hot topic, and the old 7506, the Sony 7506, has been or still are seen as the best. Do you recommend anything else?
Good, Bill.
Yeah, the 7506 have a place, and a near place in my heart. And I've owned maybe 6 or 7 pairs, but the place that they have predominantly for me is monitoring dialogue in field recording circumstances. They're pretty bright in the mid-range, and it really helps if you're trying to make sure that somebody's saying the words correctly in a field place. I'm not sure they would be my favorite. In fact, here at my desk, I find that the fact that they are not heavily sealed is working a little bit against me as a voiceover guy now doing a lot of long work here. And I think I'm going to go to a more closed back headphone because of that. So what I'm saying is that headphones have qualities just like everything else we use in audio. And you try to pick the set that does what you need it to do as well as it can.
Good, Marty.
Yeah, the 7506, is kind of the entry level headphones that a lot of people use as they're getting into field recording. They are great for production assistant monitoring and stuff like that. I started with them, but I found that the frequency response wasn't great. It's certainly not flat. It has accentuated parts of the frequency band that can either hide or accentuate things, hide things that are I want to pay attention to, or accentuate things that really aren't there. So I moved on to ultrasone headphones, which were very, very nice, very interesting, and more sound isolating. But I've kind of settled on the Audio Technica ATM50s as a pretty much all around, very nice quality, very good sounding, reasonably flat headphones. I do know that some people who are really sticklers about being absolutely true and flat prefer the Beyerdynamic DT770s, which I wasn't my favorite, but a lot of people do love them.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I find in the location sound world, there are two big camps. I'm of the 7506 camp. I learned on them, so it's what my ears are used to. I know how it translates to different systems very well. The other camp is the Sennheiser HD25 or HD26 camp, and there's a lot of arguments between, well, not arguments, a lot of very productive discussions between production sound mixers about which is the should be people's headphone monitors of choice for location sound. At the end of the day, it's what your ears know, and for me, the 7506 certainly is not flat, but for me, the emphasis it has on the 5-6K range points out to me things I need to work on. So if I can get it sounding good in here, it usually sounds very good in other systems.
Good guy.
Yeah, I'm on that opposite end of the spectrum. I'm the HD25-1-2 guys. And it's because I like the little flip up. So on the right side, you could flip it up. And then it also has two bands on the top where you can spread them apart. And in the box is also some velour. So you have your choice of if you just want the regular, I think it's some kind of plastic or velour slipovers. And for the 7506s, you'll see a lot of guys get Garfield softies, and they'll put those over the top, especially if you're sweating a lot. You're working. Oh, he's got his Mickey's got his softies on there. Yep, and those are nice because eventually the 7506s wear off, and then people start saying, "Hey, what's that black thing you got on your face?" And it's a piece of that. They just fall apart. And then I just went and bought a pair of 7506s recently off Amazon, and they were counterfeit. So be very careful. And they were from Amazon, so be very careful about where you buy these things from. So I had to return them because they just didn't sound right, and I went on YouTube and looked around, and sure enough, there's telltale signs of what's counterfeit. They're easily knocked off, so be careful about where you get them from.
Courtney?
I used to go with the Beyer DT480s. They were good for situations where you had to mount a little boom microphone on them because they have the ability to mount an extra boom for talkback or for comms. I have, for the Sony headphones, instead of the 7506, I have the venerable precursor, the MDR V6 monitor series, which I think have better transducers than the 7506. And so I still have those, several pairs of those, and I like those a lot. It's primarily what I use these days. They're nice because they fold flat, and not flat, but they fold into a little ball and fit into a little leather case, and they're easy to transport multiples of them in a small area.
And go ahead, Jeff.
I'll just, want to emphasize what Marty said, and it's definitely you would need to develop the ear, like Mickey says. I was using those for voiceover, and the emphasis on some of the high-end frequencies, or that 5K, I was spending time editing things that many experts far more experienced than I said, don't spend your time on these things. If you've got everything else, don't spend your time on these things. That I was hearing, and it was driving me crazy with those. So I've switched to Beyer Dynamics. So that is something to think about. You will hear things. And as Alex has said with, I think you mentioned that the slightly higher up model from the in-ears that you use were just giving you, I think you said, like too much.
Well, no, that you got used to. I got used to it, of course, and I wouldn't use I wouldn't use my in-ears for anything critical. I just use it for. But what I will say was a big jump up from just regular IFBs. So I was using regular IFBs, and suddenly I heard a lot more. But these definitely, like my in-ears right now, definitely lean heavily into the mids and high ends, and it's not accurate at all. So you can't. I switch my headset when I'm going to mix something. I don't use these for that.
And I just say that to point out that you were, if I recall, you were hearing things that you didn't want to be hearing during the show and things. Well, no,
it was just because I wasn't used to it. Now I'm used to it, and I actually like it. In fact, I hear a lot on I can hear things clicking on other people's inputs as well. So I hear a lot now. So which I do like. It was just hard the first day. I didn't realize how much I was adding to the show that I didn't intend to. And but I very quickly, my studio, and this relates to headsets, my studio got a lot cleaner because I had I had more data. And so the sound definitely dropped down after that. Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Appleton, Wisconsin, up next again. What sample rates do you aim for? Are there reasons to go higher than 48 kilohertz?
Mickey?
It's not as a location sound mixer. It's not my decision to make that. It's usually up to post production and your re-recording mixer and your supervising sound editor what they want to receive on that end. In terms of reasons to go higher than 48 kilohertz for dialogue for speech, there are some mixers, including myself and the teams that a bunch of the teams that I work with, collaborate with, that find that some noise suppression tools work better at higher sampling rates, like 96 kilohertz. There are productions where in post does request for 96K, for even for speech, for regular onset speech, but that is rare because everyone in the pipeline from your DIT that is making rushes to your post house, that is making your intermediates to your assistant picture editor, and your picture editor, all the way to your post sound department, has to be on the same page regarding working at a different sampling rate aside from that is different from the standard 48 kilohertz. For gathering sound effects, I typically roll at the highest sampling rate I can do, which is usually 192 kilohertz. But with larger channel counts, your recorders are usually limited to 96 as well. But for effects gathering, I go as high as I can. On set for a narrative, if we have an effects day, or say a car day where we're only doing exterior tracking shots of vehicles with no dialogue to record, just merely effects, but they are sync. I will also try to, if I'm given the chance to, by post, I will try to push for 96 kilohertz or 192 for that as well, just because we're not dealing with sync sync dialogue with that. But in most occasions with dialogue, it's 48 kilohertz.
Jeff?
So the reason, Mickey, I assume you're doing that for sound effects gathering, is that oftentimes sound effects are processed heavily in post and manipulated. And one of those ways they're manipulated is slowing them down, which reduces, makes things sound bigger, generally reduces their speed, but also that will take things that are ultrasonic beyond our hearing. And if you slow it down, it will bring them into the audible range. And if you don't record at those higher rates, you basically have, if you take a 48 kilohertz signal that caps out at 24K, and you drop it by a factor of 4, now you only have sound up to 6 kilohertz. So recording at 192 gives you that. The other place where it's really useful, and this is not in a capture way, is in some types of processing that's nonlinear. So distortion processing, compression limiting, that can really benefit from higher sampling rates, because it does produce, even if the audio is at 48K, upsampling it, because when you do that nonlinear processing, you are creating harmonics that are above the Nyquist, above the half the sample rate, and those will alias. So good limiters and distortion processes will upsample in the process, in the plugin, do the processing, and then downsample with anti-aliasing, so you don't get those artifacts. But that's not a capture. For me, 48K is fine, except for these really specific cases that Mickey's talking about, which is sound effects gathering and having dialogue so you can do noise processing.
Yeah, I saw someone, there's someone on YouTube that took a chicken and recorded them with a CO100K and then slowed that all down, and it sounded remarkably like a dinosaur. like in that effects drop. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I concur with my colleagues there. If you're recording sync dialogue, definitely stay at 48K, because that is the standard PCM rate for digital audio throughout video and television and film. So if you're recording special sound effects, like was said, you can go higher frequency rate if you're going to slow the sample rate down in post to get special effects, and or use it for some type of noise removal. But remember, there are a lot of brick wall filters in a lot of recorders designed to cut off to prevent those artifacts from happening. So make sure that you remove those brick wall filters if you're operating at a higher sample rate, 96 or 192. But I would only reserve those higher sample rates for special effects. And of course, you're using a lot more media that way too.
Mickey?
Yeah. Just wanted to note as well that if you are wanting to gather effects and record at, say, 96 or 192 kilohertz, you definitely don't want to use wireless, especially digital wireless for that, because a lot of these digital wireless systems are capped at, some are even capped at 40 kilohertz, not even 48 kilohertz. So you have to think of if you want to capture those higher frequencies and bring those down into the audible range, as Jeff mentioned, you want to make sure that your entire pipeline is capable of capturing and transporting the entire frequency range that you want to record.
Next question.
Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona comes up next. The Zoom F6 versus the MixPre 6.2. Big price gap. What is the value of the MixPre 2 over the Zoom F6?
Mickey?
For me, it would be the higher quality preamps. I know the F series has bumped up the quality of the preamps compared to their earlier H series recorders, but there is still quite a noticeable difference in the fidelity, the cleanliness, and the amount of clean gain their preamps can produce. And on top of that, true analog limiters is priceless in field recording.
Okay.
Yeah, it just comes down to what you're recording and ease of use. The interface on the front of the F6, the knobs here are very close together, so it's very tight. The benefit here is if you add on the Bluetooth dongle, unlike the sound devices, you can actually control the levels with the iOS app. So that's a win in my book for certain situations. It's a lot cheaper. And then these 6 XLR inputs they all have pre's in them. They all have preamps. So you don't get that with the 6. You also get the MP style batteries built in, so you can just without adding a plate, you could, because built into the F6 you have the AA's that comes out of the box, but you can add, I think it's $100 or so for the ability to use the MP style batteries. So it's just as far as sound quality differences, as Mickey was saying, it's going to be, you really got to have an ear to hear the difference with the same mic with these two recorders. They both don't have XLR out. That you'd have to use mini plug out. This one can act as a leader for timecode, so you can have this one slave other devices, whereas the MixPre can't do that. So a couple different differences besides just the ergonomics of the thing. Some people don't want this form factor. They like the form factor of the sound devices, and they like the sound devices name as well. So it just depends on what you want to do. And of course, noise assist is the bigger thing for a lot of people, is just, do they want to use noise assist in a noisy environment? And that's a plug-in that's going to cost you a couple $100.
Courtney?
Yeah, I agree. The preamps are the main attraction for the MixPre 6, although I agree also the preamps and the F series have gotten quite good. So they're very close within, a few dB of self-noise of the sound devices units. The Zoom does have a lot of features better than that the MixPre doesn't have, and Guy covered a lot of those. The full 6 preamps, the ability to record ambisonics, you can do 32-bit float. I think the MixPre 6.2 does 32-bit float now with a firmware upgrade. And I like the bigger LCD on the F6. It's not a touch screen, but the touch screen gets kind of small on the MixPres and hard to operate. Where you have a better, I like the user interface a little bit better on the Zooms in the LCD for that operation.
Next question.
Eric Strand in Essex, Connecticut says, I'm usually instructed to purchase small cameras and lights so that we don't have to travel with a bunch of cases. Over time, I'm finding it easier to have larger, fewer items and accessories. You put it in the case and you're done. What has been your experience?
Bill?
I've been right where you are. I started in an era where you had to bring everything, and most of our gear was large. I'll never forget lugging those huge Airy kits with 4 lights in them. They were heavy. They were hard to travel with. But you understood that you had the basic light-generating stuff that you needed. You had scrims and accessories. You had stands. You had barn doors. And you could shape and work with the lights because you got to know your tools really well. I learned a ton about lighting with that stuff. Nowadays, we have much more efficient, much easier to travel with light LEDs and cobs and things that really make that stuff. I would never go back and work with that stuff again. But the idea that you're articulating here is to have a kit that is more robust, more flexible, that you can really learn to operate, I think is still incredibly valuable. Just going out and buying whatever light you can find in your local market and sticking it up and learning how to modify it and control it and build around it so you get the effect you want, that is hard to do when you're working on a different light every time. So I think what you put in your head is much more important than what you put in your kit. So I would go in the direction you're leaning. Buy the best stuff you can afford and learn to use it. That's going to stand you really in good stead for the rest of your career.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly. Like over the years, over the past, especially the past decade and a half, the size and weight of production sound equipment has decreased a lot. In the past, like we would go around with the sound devices 788s with 7 full size 400 or 411 Lexusonics receivers in there, and you're talking about the 30, sometimes 35 pound sound bag that's strapped to you on your harness. Nowadays, you can get a sound devices 888 with a Nexus receiver with 16 channels of RF coming in a small, tiny package in a sound bag that's a third of the size and a third of the weight. So with each production, you sort of have to take a look at what are your requirements. Okay, this is a run and gun dock. I only need 2, 3, 4 channels of wireless. I'll carry 2 more channels of wireless in my Pelican as a backup in case a wireless system fails, or there's an unexpected like larger channel count interview that I need to capture. But I think it's with the development of technology, a lot of these tools have gotten smaller and lighter.
Yeah, and one thing that I would think about is how you're going to store it when you take it out into the field. So when we're talking about field, I think if you look back on, what my brother does for a Steadicam, if you look at the Steadicam thing, what you saw was a very, very detailed place where everything went, every little cable, everything that he needed, everything that he needed to put together, and making sure that you know how that's going to go back together and it has to be easy for you to do because you're going to be doing things in a fast motion and you're going to be in the field and it's going to be unforgiving. And so making sure that you, whatever cases that you're using to do these pack outs, that there's a lot that's labeled, that's a lot that naturally orders itself so that you can get it in and out and get back to it. One of the things we try to do every time we pack is to pack as if we had to open it again when we get to the next place, so that it's not just, a bunch of stuff all piled in there that you have to work through. It doesn't always work that way, but generally we try to get that pack out to be as clean as possible. And what makes that pack out easy are cases that tell you where things go as you do it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it's almost like the military where you just want to go in and get the job done. So sometimes you want a case like this. I was watching this video yesterday, and there's a studio here in Seattle where I got to play with this DJI Ronin. Alex, when we have these guys over, you're gonna love this camera. So this gentleman, Josh, shows how he deploys this camera super fast because he does a lot of run and gun news stuff. And without having to put the lenses on and having everything in place, he said he's able to instead of, you can see all this garbage that he's pulling out where he used to have to build the nucleus and all this stuff. And I put a link to the chat and how he's able to clean up all the powering and all that stuff with just one thing instead of having to put his Ninja and all this other stuff together. But that camera is like $10,000. But again, it's just a case for how fast you need to do. Do you need to get in there with military-like precision and then get out, and you don't want to be fumbling with cables or snagging on stuff and dropping stuff. And when you're in the heat of battle, I mean, you don't want to fumble. So there is a case for spending more money to be able to deploy quickly.
Next question.
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles is up next. Can you talk a bit about powering options for field recording kits?
Marty?
All right. So whether you're doing camera or audio, they're kind of different things. For a camera rig, you've got one big central camera that mounts on the back of the rig, and then you want to power your camera, you want to power your monitor, you want to power your wireless gear. So either you choose a battery that has multiple ports on it, or you add on a battery distributor, which I'll get into in a moment. For audio gear, you can use things like AA batteries for some of your gear, or 9 volts, and batteries that I like to use now. Don't go cheap on batteries and on your chargers. Don't go cheap on your chargers. There's a big difference. The secret to longevity and reliability on your batteries is your charger. Okay, so we'll talk about that. The Ansman batteries, they have 2,850 milliamp hours. Take that as a rating as to how long the battery will run in your devices, and depending on the device, that runtime will be longer or shorter depending on how hungry it is. One thing to note about these is that there's a standard battery, and then there's the slimline battery. Some battery compartments won't take a full-size rechargeable lithium or rechargeable battery, so they make these slimline batteries, and most notable are some of the wireless receivers. But then another AA battery to really take a serious look at, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but there's more power to it. This is a lithium polymer battery from iPowerUS.com. Takes its own charger, which they provide. They also have high-powered 9-volt batteries. So these are very high-powered, long-lasting batteries. But then and these are good even if you have a full bag central battery system, because they can act as backups. For a full bag system, you want to look at something like an NP style battery, an NP1, or you can go to a small camera battery. So from Core SWX.com is a nano style battery that is pretty small. It's less than 4 inches by 2.6 by 1.65 inches. It has 98 watt hours in it. And it looks very nice. Now, when we get into distribution, one of my favorite accessory companies is Remote Audio. Remote Audio is a branch of True Audio. It's a retailer that has locations around the country and in Canada, but Remote Audio products are carried by other dealers as well. This is a battery distribution system. Takes in a central battery, and then it has several output ports, and you can get custom wiring that they will provide you to go from this distributor to various pieces of equipment. And there's a switch that you can get for this that can be outside of the bag. And there's also a device that will show you the battery voltage. Okay, come on out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's see. And so, yeah, so this goes in the bag, and then there's outboard gear that wires to it. I can actually show you. There is a...
You muted yourself.
This is a device that has an LCD monitor on it, a display on it that will show you the battery voltage and how much draw is currently being pulled from that voltage on all of the battery outputs. If you're on a cart situation, you might want to go to something that will distribute 4-pin XLRs, because that is more common for cart situations. With higher powered devices, you're using 4-pin XLRs for power. So there's the battery itself, there's distribution, and then there's chargers.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, similar to what Marty showed earlier. For bag powering, I use there's this company called Inspired Energy who makes all sorts of batteries from for different industries, from medical industry, for the aerospace industry. But they have a battery, this specific model of battery that has been adopted by the location sound industry. It was first adopted by a company in France called Audio Route. And they essentially rebranded the Inspired Energy batteries and created an ecosystem of battery cups and battery distribution specifically for this eSmart battery. Other companies that rebrand the Inspired Energy battery include Remote Audio. They call theirs the HiQ battery, and it's essentially the same thing directly from Inspired Energy, but rebranded along with Remote Audio's own ecosystem of accessories for it. Sound Devices also resells this exact same battery from Inspired Energy, and they call it the XL Smart battery. I use the Remote Audio BDS4 for bag use, and on a cart, I use the PowerSlife Life Zeus, which is a lithium iron phosphate battery system, which, as Marty mentioned, has XLR outputs, and as well as is rack mountable, so it's good for mounting on a rack on your sound card.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, I use the only thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is sealed lead acid batteries, which I use block batteries, like the ones from PowerSonics makes one that's a 12-volt sealed lead acid. I put those in a Pelican case and put Canon 4-pin connectors on them, and they work quite well to power a cart. We'll power a cart all day. I think we used one of those at Cinegear, kept everything going. But they're big and bulky and heavy, and you got to remember to take them out and charge them every night because they're sealed lead acid. They don't quick charge, and it takes about 10 hours to charge them fully with a standard charger.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Appleton, Wisconsin. In this case, he says, let's talk mix philosophy. What is the production mix? Are you trying to get nominal levels from each mic or think aesthetically about the mix ahead of time? How much do you change levels?
Now go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for the production mix, you want to, as much as possible, think as if this is what goes out to air, or this is what is used in the final delivery for the film that you're mixing. So you want to get good, healthy levels, and not only think level-wise, but yes, aesthetically, as you mentioned, get a mix that if people want to or have to, they can use it as their final deliverable.
Good, Marty.
Yeah, philosophy is a very important topic and one that gets discussed a lot. Depending on whether you're going live or you're going to record, if you're going live, obviously you want to be thinking in advance about your mix and your environmental sound and how it's going to sound and where your microphones are. And you want to get a good balance and EQ on each individual input plus your mix itself. And that would include thinking about compression for making the vocals sound very present. And depending on whether some people have a very dynamic, very percussive rhythm to their speech, some people modulate the volume of their voice as they're speaking a lot, and you want to be thinking about how you're going to translate that to intelligible, consistent levels in your mix. If you're recording, you then have the option of recording ISO tracks as well as a mix track. And for ISO tracks, you want to maximize the level of your recording for each track. That may not translate to the best mix, so you also want to do a live mix to a separate track or two tracks, depending on whether it's mono or stereo. So think about all of that.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. If you're doing production recording, not a live show, record if you can ISO tracks for all the individual microphones that are used, if they're lavaliers or multiple booms, and then do a mix that you would like to hear in dailies or like to hear with in editorial, to give them all the tracks, all the mics mixed together into a single left-right track or mono track, so that they can use that for editorial, so that they know what sound is there. They'll go back and lay in, and they'll pull in the individual ISO tracks if there's any problems with your mix. But I ride the gain, especially if there's multiple lavs. You only want to keep one lav dominant at a time and take everything else down a number of dB so that you don't hear more of the room. You will hear, if you hear the sound from one actor is coming in another actor's lav, it's going to sound more roomy and more boomy. So you want to ride the gain, watch the script, and if it's scripted dialogue, and just bring up the microphone of the person who's talking, and you got to be able to anticipate those lines coming up. So ad-lib situations can be pretty tough. In that case, you kind of just don't bring them down quite as much. You just favor the person that is speaking at the time if you're using lavaliers. And same thing with booms. You want to be careful on transitions between microphones. If you're using booms, a lot of times you'll have to have one boom operator cover actor A from point A to point B, and then you have another boom that picks them up there and goes on down the hall or something with them. So you have to be able to transition between those mics carefully and match that crossfade between the two, so that you don't hear a dropout or a peak when you go from one mic to the other. So I mix like it was live, but for production, post-production primarily.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, definitely on a narrative, you are writing your faders the entire time. You would have, that's one of the reasons why I love scriptation, because I'll have my sides or my script there, and I will note down each channel that I have to fade up and down at what points on the script itself, so that A, keeping the noise floor down, and B, making sure that people that have finished their part in the scene and have walked off set don't suddenly come in. And also, just to note, because I also do post-production aside from location sound, if I get a really good production mix, I will use that on my dialogue edit as opposed to going back to the ISOs. If it's a solid production mix, why would I redo all the great work that was done on set if I don't have to? And about the quality of your production mix, picture editors and the picture editorial department as a whole will not want to have 4, 8, 16, 32 ISO tracks on their Avid timeline or their Final Cut timeline or Resolve timeline. They want just a single track there. So what they will put on their timeline would typically be just the production mix. So you want to get that sounding right again for them to have a good listening experience for the picture editorial process, even before it hits production, before it hits post sound.
Next question.
Jesse Mills in the San Francisco Bay Area comes up next. I'm a sound mixer in the San Francisco Bay Area and do mostly corporate and commercial. When I do docs, which I love, I sometimes get the ask to use someone else's kit. I have an answer for this, but wonder what others say.
Mickey?
If it's because I am filling in for another sound mixer for, say, days that they're unavailable on a specific project, if I'm just filling in for those days, then especially if I know that production sound mixer that I'm subbing in for, and I know their equipment is well maintained, then I'm good with that. I would, of course, charge a day for prep of turnover of the gear, and also for configuring it to my preference. But I'm good with that. But if it's because production wants to save money, then I will, since they're in that mindset of saving money, I will go and QC what gear they have, if it is capable of a professional production level of service. Because if they're trying to save money and they give me, Sennheiser G3s for a documentary where I'm expected to be able to do things that, more affordable wireless gear could not do, then I'm not gonna accept having to work with gear like that.
Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Any opinions on the new Deity Theos wireless lav gear? And he's got one in the 550 to 663 megahertz zone.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. So we got 4 channels. I think early last month. They're pretty darn impressive for the price, I would say. The ability to be able to have some feature sets that are only available in systems that are about 5 times the price, like say the remote control of gain, the ability to have an antenna distro at that price point built in without having to modify the system with an aftermarket upgrade like SMA connectors is great. I think it's good to have competition at this price range. It's not there yet, say in terms of I would say the build quality and the range of say our Lectrosonics systems, but it's promising.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana, has our last one. What about the newer transmitter that also records locally? Would you consider using them for field recording?
Mickey?
Yeah, going back to the Theos system from the previous question, I consider onboard recording as something nice to have if I need it. I do not plan for a shoot with that in mind, but if I sense a slight risk in transmission, then I will enable it on the transmitter. But I will operate as if I don't have that. I will still try to get the reception into my recorder and make sure I can actually listen to what I'm recording.
It's quite an hour. It's a lot like Posted. He's like, my favorite second hour ever. So anyways, it was great. Thank you so much to the panelists for bringing all of this knowledge to us today, and for the first hour and the second hour. We can't do this without you. Thanks to the producers for all the great questions. Kept guiding us down a very good path of answers, and so we really appreciate all your questions in the first hour and second hour. Reminder to the producers, if I sent your question back, we didn't get to all of them, but we kind of closed in our elbows and tried to get to as many as we could at the last 10 minutes, but we still had some left over. So anyway, those, you can still bring those back on another day if you'd like to. And thanks to the incredible team who makes this happen every single day, that works on the development, that works on the, there's people that are developing the software and the hardware. There's people hosting the hardware. There's people managing what we're talking about every day. There's people who are actually cutting this show and putting this together, and we can't do this without you. So we really appreciate all of your work on the show. We traveled 73,000 miles today. That's 118,000 kilometers, and that is 578 million bananas for scale. All right, let's jump into After Hours. There you go.
But are those 24-bit bananas, or are they 32-bit floating?
I really, a lot of people don't think you need 24, but I really moved to 32-bit bananas because, there's just a lot more potassium. A 32-bit banana has it has like 4 or 5 times as much potassium as a 24-bit banana, and nobody uses 8-bit bananas anymore.
Here's a question for you: did bananas float? Is it 32-bit float bananas, or are they sink bananas?
Exactly.
The brown spots.
But I like the
much
idea
more
of using,
definition in 30-bit.
Exactly.
I like using Courtney's camera as a clock, 15-minute increment clock.
Every 15 minutes, you'll see the glitch. Sorry. I'm gonna have to buy a new computer. I've bought a new computer, and the new one does it too.
You can fix it.
Get a B-Link.
Just get a Mac.
Courtney.
Just get a Mac, Courtney.
Mac.
I say just time it